We will now look at the language bioprogram. In continuation of what we have just discussed, which is the language bioprogram hypothesis. Now this hypothesis has been introduced by Derek Bickerton, according to which we have seen that the idea is to look at the creation of Creole languages and the similarities that they have, and also the comparison of the first or child's language acquisition with the Creole languages. So all these factors contribute towards the understanding of this hypothesis. The key is to understand that according to Bickerton, in the absence of input from the environment, the children have a system which is the bioprogram language system, which everybody or every child is born with. It is the innate language system, which he refers to as the bioprogram language system. Unlike pigeons, the Creoles resembled the structural rules of other languages. From these observations, basically Bickerton has proposed the concept of language bioprogram. Children's Creoles was based on their access to English, and this again, as we have seen, that Bickerton's major work has been with regard to Hawaiian natives. So we will continue our discussion with reference to that study, in which children's Creoles were based on their access to English, the language of plantation owners. Bickerton points out, however, that contact between immigrants and their families and owners was limited, and that the Hawaiian Creole differed in several respects from English. Another possibility is that linguistic features not attributable to English could be derived from original native languages of the parents. For example, children whose parents were Portuguese might incorporate some Portuguese elements in their Creoles. Again, the evidence provided by Bickerton suggests otherwise. He found that Hawaiian Creole was strikingly similar to Creoles created by children in very different parts of the world. The language bioprogram hypothesis has been further supported by the studies of language development in congenitally deaf children by Golden Meadow. So these studies were basically the studies of language development in congenitally deaf children, again were supported by Golden. The children were between 13 months and 4 years at the start of the study and were studied every 2 to 4 months. So in their study, we see that the subjects were studied every 2 to 4 months for about a year and a half. None of these children were exposed to conventional sign language. Most were educated by the oral method, which emphasizes lip reading, and some were not in any educational program. Nevertheless, the children invented a form of gestural language called home sign that was similar in many respects to the language of children with normal hearing. They used gestures that were similar morphologically to sign language and signs that referred to information spatially and temporally displaced from the speakers and listeners. Thus, when linguistic input is minimal, deaf children may create a gestural language that is similar in many respects to normal children's language. Now the question is how the proposed biogram might operate in the absence of ordinary linguistic stimulation. What happens if children are given appropriate linguistic input? Bickerton suggests that under these circumstances, the bioprogram is supposed to be or is suppressed and children learn the native language. In particular, he claims that children use what he calls the Preemption Principle. That is, if you hear people using a form different from the one you are using and do not hear anyone using your form, abandon yours and use theirs. This principle is based on assumptions found elsewhere in language development. The assumption that there is one unique form for a given function, and that is what Pinker proposed in 1984. The assumption that alternative candidates for that form are in competition with one another. Chomsky and other proponents of natism have emphasized the task-specific or modular nature of our language capacity, and Bickerton's hypothesis is consistent with this emphasis. But it is more than that. Basically, task specificity refers to the notion that cognitive processes associated with language use are not general purpose problem-solving processes, but are instead restricted to language only. To conclude, studies of Creole language suggest that we have a linguistic backup system, the language bioprogram, which springs into action when language input is limited.